Welcome to EnVision Center News, where we discuss community impact and involvement with today's nonprofit leaders and philanthropists.
Reno and Clay, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. You run Carousel of Smiles. What the heck is that?
Well, the Carousel of Smiles right now is a restoration project of a 1920s vintage Allen Herschel carousel. It's a 36-horse, 40-foot diameter machine.
36 horse means 36 horses on the carousel going
36
around. Okay.
horses on the carousel going around. They ride 3 abreast. So they ride, the best way to describe it, I guess, is that they ride 3 deep on the carousel. There's also 2 chariots, and each one is hand-carved. Each one is different, has its own personality, and we're about 85% complete on that restoration. And once the restoration is complete, we'll move towards getting it housed for operation here in Sandpoint.
Very exciting. So is restoration all of the above? Like it's painting, it's the mechanics of it. I mean, how does it work mechanically? What state was it in when you got it?
It's the whole thing. This carousel was created around 1920, and it went on to the Midwest Fair Circuit and had a pretty active life till our understanding is about 1952 when it last operated. It had a refresh somewhere in there, we think in the early 40s. But by the time it got loaded into its 2 trailers and abandoned in a farmer's field in 1952, it was pretty tired.
Yeah.
A lot of breakage on the horses. The paint was probably layers deep of park paint. And it just, the carnies could get a newer carousel that operated without all that maintenance issue. So that's why a lot of them were abandoned. So it was in pretty tough condition. And so we've been restoring all of it, literally top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
How does one get into carousel restoration? Like now this is obviously a passion. I don't know if it's all you do now or just a passion project or what, but like how does one fall into that?
Well, this is all Reno's dreams. She's the one that's responsible for all this happening. So it's a great story. Tell it, Reno.
Where should I begin? I've loved carousel since I was a child. I grew up in Butte, Montana. There was a place there called the Columbia Gardens. It was a respite from the mining community of Butte for families, and it had beautiful park and pavilions, a big picnic area, and 3 rides. It had a big wooden roller coaster, a biplane ride, and a carousel. And I loved the carousel. I spent a good part of my summers up until I was 12 years old riding the carousel, going to the gardens, enjoying it. Each year the carousel operated from Memorial Day until Labor Day, and after Labor Day they would take the horses off of that machine and store them in the pavilions there for the winter. And in November of 1973 those pavilions caught on fire and burned. And the idea that carousel burned up in that fire broke my heart. Mm-hmm. And it instilled this spark in me of someday I'm going to find another carousel and I'm going to fix it up and I'm going to bring it to my hometown. And I've lived in Sandpoint since 1981. Mm-hmm. And so Sandpoint's definitely my hometown. And I shared that dream with Clay when we met, and
our second date was on a carousel, by the way, so she never let go of that
and
dream.
Romantic. I mean, how many rom-coms do they end up on a carousel,
You're right. Not enough, actually. And so we just sort of half-heartedly started looking for a carousel, but
looking for a carousel? What does that mean?
Well, Reno said, let's see if we can find an old carousel to restore. And I'm like, sure, honey, because by the 90s, there were no carousels left. The collecting craze started in the 70s. I was positive they were all gone, all collected. I was pretty safe with this idea. And in 2000, by sheer happenstance, we found out about a carousel that was coming up for auction that no one really knew about. And that's a whole other serendipitous story. My sister-in-law was out in Kansas helping her college roommate with her roommate's father's Americana collection. He was a big Americana collector. He was an IGA grocer. He used to buy all kinds of Americana stuff, and he's the one that started the craze of putting Americana things on the top shelves of grocery stores. He's credited with that. He had 5 stores in the Kansas City area. And she like bought a Christmas gift for my kids in July, and my sister-in-law doesn't do Christmas shopping in
Very
July.
out of character.
So I was like, well, what are you doing? And she rattled off all the stuff they were doing, and I just thought to say, hey, do they have a carousel in that collection? And I can remember putting the phone down and going, hey, Shelley, do you guys have a carousel? And yeah, we got one that's going to be surprised at the end of the auction. This was a big 2-week auction, and they sent us some photos, and Reno said, we can't let this pass. This is a fully intact carousel. They didn't really know what it was.
That's what was crazy was it was stored in two traveling trailers and had been for 48 years in a sheep meadow outside of Kansas. And just by looking at the few pictures, I said, that's not just like a collection of horses or whatever. That's a whole carousel. How can we not figure
Usually
out?
when people find them or collect them, they're just collecting the individual horses, not the full, I don't know, what do you call the thing that it sits on?
Mechanism.
The full mechanism, right? Is that...
That's correct. Yeah, when people started realizing these were kind of cool items, they really started when they wanted to collect the horses and the fancy horses, and so the mechanisms, which are just big and unwieldy, and tended to have just been left abandoned. So, but this one was together, and you could tell that the mechanism trailer, or the one trailer with most of the mechanism was in, hadn't been touched. And,
so those trailers were like airtight, and there wasn't like mold all over it or something.
They were reasonably airtight. It's fortunate it was in the Midwest, not like in Florida or something.
Sure.
So,
It really is sort of a miracle that it survived being in those trailers for 48 years the way it was. At one point, the Americana collector took the horses out of the trailer, had them stripped of all of their park paint, and repainted 2 of them. I think his intention was to use them as decorations in his groceries. But I don't really know why the rest of them weren't finished. I think maybe it was a bigger job than he anticipated, and so they just all went back in without any paint or any kind of protection on them, and sat there probably from about the mid-'80s in that condition. So that they survived at all is really remarkable. That they didn't get some sort of, beetle or moisture in there that rotted them or something is miraculous.
Yeah, or a leak in the trailer roofs, and so they were pretty intact. I mean, the field mice enjoyed it.
Oh,
And,
yeah,
they
that
made
was
homes in there. But,
yeah. The mice.
but
loved
surprisingly, it was in remarkably good condition. But so we were able to purchase this thing, and we moved it to a storage barn, and then put it inside. But we didn't unload it, because you could only unload it for once, the first time in so many years. You only get to do that once. So
Did you get in a bidding war? Was it a fight
no,
to get it?
no,
It
it's
was easy?
just
Okay.
that part of it was sort of interesting. We just settled on a price with the Americana collector, and he accepted that.
Okay.
And that part of it was pretty easy, actually.
Yeah, probably too easy. It's one of those things you jump into and then go, "Oh my God, what did I do?" But it was just sort of, how could you not try and save this? And so we moved it to New York State for 16 years, and as we tried to figure out what do you do with a carousel in the modern day and age, and figured out that it really would be a great asset to a community and support the community objectives and goals, and in this case the arts in Sandpoint and
history, the history of these machines. This machine came out of the factory in about 1920. That's really at the beginning of our industrial revolution in our history, and so to think that this machine is that old is kind of, it's cool. It's a great teaching experience too.
Yeah. So do y'all, or both of you, or one of you, have all the skills that you need to restore? Because I imagine you got to be kind of handy. You got to work with the motors or whatever, and then artistic with the painting and that kind of thing.
We had no idea what we were doing. But we spent about a year educating ourselves, going around to other carousel restoration processes, and just soaking up everything that we could about what it takes to restore a carousel, restore the machine, restore the animals, all of that. And we were so blessed to find a couple of museums that were doing restoration, and the National Carousel Association. Oh. Yeah, there is one. It's kind of crazy, but they were instrumental in sort of getting us on the right track and finding the right people that we needed to talk to learn how to do the restoration on this machine.
Yeah, so we'd created our restoration plan, if you will, and we had enough skills on our own set to know how to reach out to people and tell them what we're doing, and to get the group that you would need to pull this off. And we were pretty confident that Sandpoint has and it's proven out, a significant community of artists and craftsmen and tradespeople that would jump on this. We hoped anyway to help us do this, and that's exceeded our expectations of how many people are willing to work on this and just are enthused by it. So,
yeah, I remember when I learned what Carousel of Smiles is, and I was just driving past your office with my family. And I don't have any I'm not a carousel fanatic or anything, totally unbiased, but I was like, you know what? Sandpoint seems like it needs a carousel. Like, it just fits. It really does fit the vibe. It fits the culture. It makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm not surprised that a lot of people were like, yes, let me help you out with this. But can you talk about your different teams of volunteers and what they're working on?
I think the first thing to take note of before we get into the 3 different teams is how much time our volunteers have given to us. The amount of time and love that people have put into this project. We believe we have over 20,000 volunteer hours in this project already. And so Clay can probably talk the best of the 3 named teams because he named them. So.
Well, had a lot of help. So we have 3 named teams, and the first team that got named was called the Gear and Grease Gang, because we decided to launch this project. We would assemble this carousel in its unrestored state. The year before, we had unloaded it for the first time in 64 years at what is now Matchwood Brewery, and that got people excited. And then the year later, we assembled it for the first time. And so in order to do that, we had to clean the gears, clean the bearings, strip all the old decades of grease out of it and re-grease it, and assemble a team that would help assemble this thing, not being carnies, just technically minded people. They could say, well, it looks like this goes there and this goes there, and we'll put all these things together. And so we named them the Gear and Grease Gang. And then as we started to do the woodwork, we got more comfortable with the idea of taking these horses apart. Initially, we didn't want to take them apart because that's kind of scary. But now we cut the heads off, we cut the legs off, and reattach them. That's where they're laminated together. And so it seemed to make sense to call the woodworkers the Godfather Squad. And,
which fewer and fewer people are getting.
It doesn't work when we go into the high schools and younger grades.
Stare blankly at
yes,
you.
pretty much.
What are you talking about? But
just show them that scene. Wait, maybe don't do that.
No,
I don't know.
But the woodworkers love that. We have pictures of all the woodworkers who've worked on this project, which is close to 20 by now, all holding a horse head. And several of them have sent us back pictures with the horse head in the bed with their wives. It's like, all right, you guys are taking it too far. And then once that part is done, the real colorful magic is with the painters, and we call them the painters of the lost art. And so they get to really bring the personalities and the color out, and have, it's all based on Reno's color choices and her design sense and how that's working. But there's more latitude in the painting. On the woodworking side, we're staying true. We restore, we don't replace. We're really staying true to the carvings and not, we're not adding extra stuff. It'd be cool to put this on there. No, we're not doing that. This is the way they were carved 100 years ago. So we're staying true to that. And same with the mechanism. We're not, you could replace a lot of the stuff with modern materials and stuff that might hold up better. But initially, anyway, we're trying to keep it as authentic as we can, working what we have. So.
Yeah, and your website is so cool. How you can, see the before and after there's a horse on there. You can slide the arrow or whatever and see how it's changed. And then I think if you go to the ponies page, there's all the horses, and some are painted and some aren't. So that shows which ones are still left. Yeah. So
yes.
Okay.
So we have 27 horses painted now. Is that the right number?
Yeah, 27 fully painted, and you're
And
working on another 2.
Working on 2 more, and we have several more in primer. I lose count. And I think we only have 1 horse left to actually deconstruct and put back together of the original 36.
Yeah, the Godfather Squad is working on number 35. That's almost
Okay.
back together again, and there'll be some extra finishing and then priming, and the last horse is still in its condition that it came out of the trailer. So on our events next weekend, we'll have that in it. So you'll see the whole range from the way they were to the completed ponies.
Yeah. Is there a theme? Are you doing any kind of color theme or something like that with the way
Yeah.
you're painting them?
So people ask a lot about that and ask whether we're trying to paint them like they looked when they originally came out of the factory. We're not.
We're painting them better than
Yeah, we are probably. Well, I don't know if they're better, but they're different. It's really hard to find photographs of the horses when they were in the factory and when they first came out of the factory. And the photos that are out there are black and white. So you can capture tone, but you can't really capture color.
Sure.
And so what I did is I went back and studied the color palette from the 1920s. Since that's when the carousel was carved, I thought I'm going to go back and look at what colors looked like from back then. I looked at linoleums and wallpaper and paint colors and things like that and pulled our palette from those colors. And then I wanted the horses to look like real horses. I didn't want them to be like pink and purple and green horses. I wanted horses that looked like they might live in a field around here.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I wanted to do is I wanted each row to relate to itself. So we have in each row, the horses are in the same color palette on that row. So if we have a row of Palominos, they're all Palomino horses of some shade, and their trapping colors match as well. So it's fun. The eye likes that too. When the carousel is moving, it's easier to look at a whole row of horses in a similar color palette than it is to just see something that's more chaotic. So there's some science behind doing it that way.
Yeah. Fun.
Yeah, we use the term rows 2 different ways. So there are 3 circular rows. You got an outside row, a middle row, and an inside row as you're going around the circle. And then a carousel, you can think of it as a pie with slices, and this carousel
Yes.
has 14 slices of pie. And so there are 12 rows of horses and 2 rows of chariots in those pie slices. And so when we talk about the color palette rows, that's going outside, middle, and inside row, going from outside to inside the carousel. And that's some people get a little confused with that, but it makes sense when you see a carousel assembled.
Yeah. You mentioned a name that went along with the carousel. It was, I think, the name of the artist or the person that built it or something.
Probably Alan Herschel.
The RV.
Yeah. Is that what's that? The relevance of the name to the?
So the relevance of the name is that the carousel was carved by the Alan Herschel Carving Company.
Okay.
There were quite a few different carving companies that were producing carousels during the Golden Age. And Alan Herschel was one that produced carousels of the country fair style, which was they tend to be a bit simpler looking machines compared to the big park machines that are a whole different animal. And so this carousel was carved by the Alan Herschel Carving Company in North Tonawanda, New York. And the other thing that I think is an interesting thing to note is that many of the carvers that were working with him were immigrants. And oftentimes young men that had come over from other countries needed to learn a trade or maybe brought a trade with them. And so we had immigrants that carved these magnificent machines. I just think that's really amazing.
Yeah. Can you tell us what the definition of a Golden Age carousel is?
Sure. It refers to that period of time from about the late 1880s up through the 1920s, 1927, 28 or so. And that's when carousels were being hand-carved. So, as Reno said, a lot of the carousel designs and ideas and motivation came from Europe. And when they hit the exuberance of the United States back then, with the natural resources and sort of the spirit of the United States, they really expanded what a carousel was, and that's when carousels got fancier. They started putting menagerie animals on it, and bigger machines, and more elaborate mechanisms and carvings and things like that. And so that's really when the carousel world exploded in that period of time. And then starting in the mid 20s or so, the Alan Herschel Company was creating some innovations on how do you do this. These were working machines, so they didn't like the fact that legs would break if people didn't treat them right. So they started saying, well, we'll make those are the sensitive areas. We'll make legs out of aluminum. And then we'll do cast heads, and those are called half and half. So the bodies were wood, the legs were metal, and the heads were metal. And then as they started to move into the 30s, and well, you had the Depression there, but right after World War II, when the aluminum was available again, they started casting horses in aluminum, and then now fiberglass. So they actually put they put themselves out of business with the hand carvings.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is anybody today still making new carousels in that style?
Interestingly, yes. Not as many, but there are still some machines that are being hand carved today, new carvings. One of note is the Carousel in Albany, Oregon. They have an old mechanism that they're carving new animals for, and their machine's really whimsical and fun. They're carving all sorts of different animals, not just horses. They have a unicorn and a fox and I can't remember all the animals, but it's great fun. So some of that carving is still going on, but it looks different than it did back in the 20s.
And it tends to be not-for-profit projects now. I think the last company that was actually making carousels went out of business during COVID. They were making carousels, carving them out of wood, a lot of zoo carousels, endangered species carousels, so you could go ride dung beetles and all kinds of endangered species, kind
Skunks
of weird.
and
They were
stuff
also
like
making carousels for Disney cruise lines. But I don't know that there's any company making commercial-oriented carousels anymore. So
Made of any material?
yeah. Well, no, I mean, you can still get fiberglass carousels.
Okay.
So Chance Manufacturing, which took over the Alan Herschel Company, still makes rides for carnivals and things like that.
Is there a lot of carousel companies doing the fiberglass? Is there like two companies out there, kind of, they're Coke and Pepsi?
Yeah, it's
competing
probably
against each other?
something like that.
Something like
it's
that,
not a lot. And but the not-for-profit projects, the first one that was done in this country was done in Missoula, Carousel for Missoula, and that was spurred by the same fire that got Reno's dream going. And a gentleman by the name of Chuck Kaparich said, I'm going to get a group together and we're going to learn to carve carousel animals and make a carousel. And that's what they did in Missoula. It took them about 20 years, I think.
It's a beautiful carousel too, and a neat tribute to that same loss. So
yeah, very cool. It's interesting that so many people were like apparently deeply affected, by the emotional weight of that disaster. I want to talk about events and fundraising and kind of like the practical needs of the nonprofit. But I feel like we have to mention there's some coincidences with names, with Reno, with the last name. Can you tell us how that all ties in?
That's really sort of crazy. So the last place the carousel that we have operated was at the State Fair in Hutchinson, Kansas. Hutchison is our last name.
So yours just doesn't have the
extra
N.
Missing
N.
an N.
Yeah.
Drop the N somewhere along the line.
Well, more people than not put that in.
That's
Oh,
true.
really?
Yeah.
Which is painful with email because some poor guy in North Carolina gets my emails.
Hutchinson, Kansas is in Reno County. And it turns out that the carousel that we've acquired, the Alan Herschel carousel, is the same carousel. It was carved by the same carving company, Alan Herschel, as the carousel that was lost in Butte. That carousel, too, was an Alan Herschel carousel, very similar style to our carousel. If you look at old pictures of the carousel in Butte, you can see the same style of horses and trappings and things on that carousel that is on ours today. So it's sort of crazy,
It's kind
actually.
of uncanny a little bit.
A little bit uncanny, yeah.
Yeah. Crazy, the name connections there. Okay, so what's coming up? I know you got an event coming up, and then, well, we'll just go from there. Tell me about that.
All right, so we decided as we moved to this new location that we needed to re-energize the community, let them know we're still here. We got a little quiet during COVID, a little quiet while the city was doing their design challenge, and we've now moved to a private location. So we said, well, why don't we assemble it again for the second time in now probably 70 years, the Unveiling 2.0. And so that's what's happening next weekend. We're assembling the carousel at the fairgrounds, and we'll drag everything over there and build it up again. And so we have a big an event for the carousel on Friday evening that was kind of more of a word of mouth event, and then we figured that, well, since we believe we can get a fair amount of interest in coming to see this carousel assembled, we would follow on with some of our mission and invite a whole lot of not-for-profits to share the space with us on Saturday. And that's and the EnVision Center has been a big part in promoting that and getting over 30 not-for-profits to join us on Saturday. And so we've turned that into what we call the Fun Fair. And that'll be on Saturday the 23rd from 10 to 4. And there'll be quite a number of not-for-profits there, just giving out information and all the things that they do. But there'll also be activities for kids. We've got a bouncy house coming, and Creations will be there with some of their activities. And I think the Ponderay Peddlers are setting up a skills course to introduce younger kids to bicycling, which is a huge thing here. And then the Panhandle Animal Shelter has said, well, this would be a great time to do a free clinic to give vaccinations and chips and let people come in and talk about pets and pet care and all that kind of stuff. So they'll be there, and it really should just be a full, fun day. And,
I'm super excited by it because I think there's so many not-for-profits in our community that people don't even know about. And to have an opportunity to bring all those resources together and have people learn about them is super exciting for me.
Yeah, preach. We love that. And so, but you're setting it up, and then you have to take it down, and then move it back to where you work on it.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Oof.
So
Oof is right.
How long does it take to set it up and put it in? Tear it down?
we'll have it set up in 2 days. And which, was kind of funny because we did it before, and old Carney wandered by and talked to Reno and said, well, what was your problem? We used to do it in 4 hours. And,
I looked at him and I said, where were you 2 days ago? It would have been nice to have had some of your experience then. The carousel didn't come with instructions.
Right.
So we just laid it all out, and this is what we'll do again. And there is some intuitiveness to how it goes together. You kind of say, well, these two go together first, and then the center pole goes on, and you just kind of keep building it almost.
Do you
like,
ever get 10 steps deep though, and then you realized you messed up at step 5?
we did last time.
well,
yeah.
we did a little bit last time. This time we have a really good idea how it goes together.
Yeah.
It's just like a giant erector set.
Yeah.
Even though it's a big machine, it's actually fairly simple. And it's really clever. The entire carousel is hung off the top of the center pole.
It's suspended. A lot of people don't realize that it's actually suspended from the very top of the center pole. There's nothing underneath that holds the carousel up or that it rides on. Yeah, like a big umbrella. It's last time we put it up, they had the center pole down and all the gears were put on it. And I said, are you sure that you've tightened those all up before you stand that center pole up? Because it's very heavy. And, I was the only female there telling a group of 10 mechanicals guys what to do. And they're like, yeah, of course we've got it all right. And they start standing the center pole up and the gears all slide down.
You're like, and you just sipped your tea and walked
Yeah, I was
away.
sort of like,
Told you.
The only thing that stresses me a little bit about this assembling at this time is that 85% of the work is complete. So we didn't have to be super careful the last time we assembled it because there wasn't anything really that we could hurt, right? This time we'll have to be a little more cognizant of just being more careful as we put the
which kind of
carousel
ties
together.
into the joke in the painting studio, because the artists are really putting their love and passion to this, and when I said we're painting them better than the factory, when they were originally painted, this was a working machine, so the painting was fairly simple and got the job done. Well, our painters are putting very intricate, elaborate details and shading into it, and they're painting the back side of the horses just as fancy as the front side, and so most of them say, well, you can't let anybody ride this horse because I've just finished painting it. So I think most of our painters would prefer it to be behind glass and never be ridden. So it's just a matter of having to be
we
careful.
We visited a carousel this past summer, and I watched the children riding it, and they would get on the ponies and they would just be so rough with them. They would start kicking them or pulling on them or,
I'm sure you saw a couple of the adults doing that too.
Adults too, yeah.
Worse than the kids usually.
And we got off the ride and we walked out onto the boardwalk, and I looked at Clay and I said, no one's ever riding our carousel, which isn't true.
Yeah. Tell me about the long-term vision, and then kind of, I guess, will Carousel of Smiles always exist and it'll be kind of self-funding or something? Or what's the long-term plan, like once it's all put together and ready to go, ready for riders?
Well, it would be in an enclosed building, an enclosed pavilion, and we envision there'll be a fair amount of extra space in the building so that we can have events there, carousel related, birthday parties and events that aren't even related to the carousel, and possibly art exhibits that could come into town that we don't have a place in Sandpoint to have those, and just basically, connect with other events that are going on, and Halloween at the Carousel, support the food bank, tie in with the Oktoberfest and the Easter events, and just connect with just add to the other events that are going on and create new ones. So we'll operate. It should operate, virtually all the time year round. We'll have typically a volunteer crew that will with a few paid people that will make sure it's open all the time, and probably charge like $2 a ride or something.
Sure.
And we've never wanted any taxpayer money for this. It's all through donations and grants, and then we get operational. That operational revenue will help too. And to the extent that we have more revenue than our costs, so that's when we are able to start supporting in a big way other not-for-profits, whether it'd be great to say, all right, November all the revenue goes to the food bank, just to pick on that kind of thing, or there's a certain event that some not-for-profit's going to do, will come in the weekend, and the revenue from this ride this weekend goes to that kind of thing. And
what I imagine for the carousel is it becoming a year-round community asset. There's so few year-round activities today in our community, especially for underprivileged families. And I think that this carousel can fill a square there. And so I'm super excited to think that there'll be families that'll be able to come in the wintertime on a day like this where it's so dreary and really nothing else to do, and just have an amazing place to be for a while. Carousels for me are magical, and I think there's so little magic in our world today, and it's tangible magic, right? It's magic that you can see and feel and experience, and those memories that'll be created will just be so important going forward.
Do you have a timeline, like where you think you'll be ready to start? Are you building up? Will you be building a pavilion, or are you trying to find something that already exists?
Well, we spent quite a few years working with the city, and their stated goal in 2016 was to do a master plan for the city beach with and develop year-round activity, and that was kind of our call to action, because we knew by that point that a carousel would really serve that agenda really well. By the time when they did the master plan for the Parks Department, I think that started in 2019, we had done 2 events. We had started the restoration. We had a sizable community that was behind us, and so we actually were on 2 locations in that master plan, and we settled on one with the Sand Creek location. Working with the city is all about timing sometimes, and the timing was great to start with, and then the city didn't own that land, so it took a couple of years to get that land from ITD, and there was more planning done, and we kept getting kind of pushed off a bit without getting certainty, and then you had the big pickleball court, and that created a little bit of consternation among a lot of people in the town, and another election with a different agenda, not a bad agenda. We have to deal with our sewer and our streets and all that kind of infrastructure. No objections there, but just the it kind of went on a little too long, and so we took the pulse of the climate and the new city staff members, government entities, government elected officials, and said, it's going to be still another few years before we're able to work through that system, that process. And then right around this time, we heard that Bazaar was changing locations. They decided to move to a different spot out of the 502 Church Street, and we also heard that building was again available. It had been sold at one point, but that deal didn't work, and so we called up the owners, and the timing was right, and we made a deal to lease it and with an option to purchase it. And it's one of the few locations in Sandpoint that it gives us something to start with. There are not a lot of in the town of Sandpoint, not a lot of spots that would work for this, but this one does. And a little bit of renovation, we can house the carousel, and a little bit more renovation, expand the size of the building. We can do a lot there. So we're very excited by this location and think it's going to work, and ready to get to work. And hopefully in a year to 2 years, we'll have it operational inside a building.
But it won't necessarily be the long-term, like if something else popped up that was closer to the beach or something like that, then you would maybe move?
We're still open to the idea of potentially having it closer to the water or at the beach, but I love the vision for that area, the warehouse district, and that used to be the old co-op building, and when I first moved here, we bought grain for our horses and animals out of that building, and I think the carousel actually works in the idea of a warehouse district, and perhaps it's just meant to be that we do stay there and help bring that part of town up and create a bunch of synergy with Matchwood and Evans Brothers and the Pie Hut and the antique store, Marketplace Antiques, that's there, and just create something really neat in that part of town. Yeah. I think it works there.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, we'll always keep an open mind. I think from a planning perspective, when you look at what a city can do, especially one that has some land mass constraints, Sandpoint's not a huge place. This carousel project could have gone at the city beach or in the Sand Creek location, whereas it's unlikely you would ever be able to do, or the city would ever want to do, any kind of more commercial enterprises down there. We could go there. And whereas where we are now by the granary district is ripe for commercial enterprises. So we're taking away opportunities that could go there if we were able to go to Sand Creek. But that's kind of long-term stuff at this point, and we'll just see where it goes, cross that bridge.
When you get there, kind of thing. Yeah, for sure. So you need people to come out to your event.
Yes.
On the 23rd, but what other needs do you have? Somebody's listening to this and they're like, maybe they are artistic and handy or whatever, but maybe they're not. What are different ways that people can support, get involved?
Well, one of the big things we're starting to ramp up is getting our group of volunteers. We'll call them the docents, and because in this location we have a little museum going on with the completed horses and all the other stuff and some history panels, and we haven't even talked about the art panel project, which we'll get into or come out on Friday, Saturday. We'll show that, but we want people that might have a few hours a week to understand the carousel, and we can keep the building open even when we're not working in there, and that's a big need right now.
The other thing that'll be a big need going forward, and this is a hard one for me, but we do intend to purchase the building, and so we'll be putting our capital campaign together, and there will be a large ask at some point to help with the purchase and refit of the building to house the carousel there. So that's coming up too.
Right. Yeah. We're figuring out ways where there'd be a founders club and things like that. Sure. So it's not, one of the things that's gratified us when people have come in and donated to the restoration effort is sometimes we get people that, we've gotten some kids, 8-year-old kids that pull their $2 out of their pocket for their allowance money and say, I want to donate it to this project. So it's not just big checks. It's really getting people involved and contributing in however they can. And sometimes that's just enthusiasm. But,
Totally. That's just so our community, right? It's just, our community is just so, the way our community gives is just tremendous, and every little bit means so much. And so that's really fun when the kids.
We just a couple days ago, Monday evening, got a call from the Clark Fork Charter School. They were having a water issue in town there, and they needed something to do with the kids the following morning, and we happened to have been in town, so they came in, and it was great to host that school group there, and the kids were so enthused, and the parents were enthused, and
that was exciting because it's the first time we've hosted a field trip at the new location, and that was super fun. But what was, I think, most exciting that day was there was a young girl there that just she reminded me a little bit of myself at that age, just starry-eyed. She says, I want to paint a pony. I want to be part of this somehow. And I just, to see that, to nurture that is so important. It's just a really neat part of the project to see that.
Yeah, because we'll need painters going forward, because there's always going to be repair and touch up,
right.
and things like that. And we'll probably keep the restoration side of this going, and start restoring other people's horses and things like that. So we're going to keep this cadre of people and build on that going forward as well.
Well, it sounds like you don't really have a problem getting folks involved, but like we've talked about, and we are always talking about at the EnVision Centers, we are super saturated with not-for-profits in this county. 3 times the national average of not-for-profits per capita. Is it easy to sort of sell your case as far as needing volunteers and donations because you're such a niche thing, or do you find ever people being like, okay, I'm trying to deal with the homeless, or some more like direct human causes, or is it not really an issue for you with all these limited resources?
I think we struggle with that a bit because there's a lot of real serious need, and we do have some great not-for-profits that are working to satisfy that need, and we're out here with a carousel. It's kind of fun and light, and so. I know during COVID we stopped asking for donations because it was that need really became paramount. So you have that struggle, but what we believe is that it takes all aspects to have a healthy community.
Yes.
And so people are very generous in this town, and they'll find the cause that appeals to them, or multiple causes that feel to them. So even though in some ways we're all in competition, we're really not, because everybody can create an appeal that hits the heartstrings of those very generous people. We'll see when we start raising it. It's been fine raising the money for the restoration fund. And when we start to do a capital campaign for a building, we'll see how that goes. It's a little bit of a different animal.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to add to this is that we've had so many people come forward and offer their time and love and energy into this project. So many that we haven't been able to tap into all the people that have wanted to help.
No, that's quite the problem.
And
it's a great problem, but it's a horrible problem too.
It is, because you want to include all those people, and you want all of those people to be a part of the experience and what we're doing, and so it's hard when you sort of have what you need for the moment, and to feel like you have to put those people off for a bit, saying, I don't have your place yet, but kind of hang with us, stay involved, keep calling, because we're gonna find your spot. Just hang in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a huge proponent of the arts. You don't got to convince me on how important this kind of work is. I always say, like, I can tell the health of a town, predict what their problems are based on the how the arts are doing in that town. A thriving town always has a thriving art scene. And so this is a part of that. I believe it's a part of that. Maybe everyone doesn't think of carousels as part of, but this is a historic piece of art that, definitely contributes to the feeling, the vibe, the culture of this area, or will when it's up and running.
We believe that too.
We also have because we could when we have these what are called interior art panels. There are 14 panels that typically have a oval art scene in them, and we had those panels. And when we unloaded that from the trailer,
are those like on the inside?
They're on the inside, covering up some of the mechanism on the inside. There's also the rounding boards, which is that frame band around the top outside that has mural paintings as well. And paintings typically give a carousel really their sort of cultural soul, if you will.
Yeah.
And
it's really what connects them to their individual communities.
Yeah. And so when we unloaded them, the rounding board murals were not salvageable. They were painted on metal. The freeze thaw cycles, that paint was gone. There was only one out of 14 that you could even barely make out the painting, which interestingly enough is the one painting you can see in the 1952 black and white photo when you blow it up. So that's kind of another interesting aspect. But the interior panels, which were painted on wood, were painted by it was signed, and we figured out she's a well-known tattoo artist, carnival artist, and her parents were very well-known tattoo man and woman from the 1900s, and so those are a side project. They're being professionally conserved because it's kind of an important slice of Americana, and so we remade those panels in the style of Alan Herschel, and it did several years ago, called artists to paint us a scene to be on the carousel. And we got such a wide variety of submissions, including some quilt art, that Reno looked at this and said, why are we just going to pick 14 panels and live with that forever? Let's just, she said, Clay, can you remake those panels so they'll be a frame, literally a frame? And that's what we're doing. So now we have a curatable, rotating art exhibition space, and we'll change that out as often as it makes sense to change that out. And it's really cool. No other carousel has done that project, something like that.
Yeah, that's so neat. So cool. Like I said, I'm sold. You don't got to convince me. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure that we mention, that we put out there for any listeners on the edge of their seat right now?
I think I'd like to just mention one more thing about our volunteers. My gratefulness for all of them, for the time that they've put into this. We have our volunteers run the gamut of age groups and backgrounds. And one of our volunteers, she was the first woman who called me. Actually, she saw the first article in the paper and sent me 10 emails in like a 12-hour period. And the last email was, when are you going to call me? And she had just lost her third husband. Oh. And she was at a place where I think she had sort of decided maybe there just wasn't going to be a whole lot more exciting stuff out there for her. And she has embraced this project and become a part of this project. She's my art coordinator, director, and she's sort of my right hand, if you will. And this has it's given her a whole new purpose. It's changed her life. And to see that happen in this group of volunteers is just, there are no words. Really.
And there's so many people we've gotten to know that we wouldn't have gotten to know but for this project, and it's just and that's the most gratifying aspect of the entire project for us.
Yeah. Awesome.
Had it not been for this project, most of the people that were part of it I would never have known.
Right.
And that's incredible.
Right. Yeah. It is. It truly is amazing what nonprofit work, volunteering, what the effects that it has on your life beyond like, I feel good about doing something. I mean, it's just the ripple effects are never ending.
Truly.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you guys for coming on the podcast. This is such a cool, special, not-for-profit that we have in this town, and we're excited to share your story.
Come and see us next weekend. We'd love to see everybody on Saturday, the 23rd.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. For more information, you can go to crecIdaho.com. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you again soon.